Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. A little bit of an awkward intro this week. Andy is out seeing some of our players, so it's going to be me tonight with our guest, who I'm excited to have on tonight. He's in his 6th year at Colby College. Tonight we are going to be joined by Jesse Woods. Jesse, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. The Mules are off to a phenomenal start here, 13-3. But just give our listeners a quick rundown of how you've ended up as the head coach at Colby.
Yeah, so it's been I think this is my 20th year in college baseball. I actually played at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, and when I was at Wheaton was like a startup baseball program, and I was there, I think, the second or third year of the program, and I was lucky enough to play on some great teams at Wheaton and play in 3 NCAA regionals and win some NUMAC championships while I was there. And then I was lucky enough that Coach Podbelski let me stay on his staff when I graduated, and so I coached at Wheaton for 3 years. And again, we did really well. We played in the national championship game actually one of those years, and won some more NUMAC championships. And then I was lucky enough to go to Boston College for 3 years. I coached at BC. And I was lucky enough to be on some great teams there. And then I think, that our success over time there gave me the opportunity to go to the University of Notre Dame. I was at Notre Dame for 8 years, and then the Colby job opened, and I'm just super excited to get back to New England and really build a program here at Colby that's competing for NESCAC championships, year in and year out. And the last couple of years we've been able to do it. It's been a weird 6 years. It's almost weird for me to say I've been here for 6 years, because 2 of those years were COVID, and we didn't really play a whole lot of baseball there, but it's been an unbelievable ride here at Colby, and just really excited to keep it going. We're playing good right now, but we got a lot of baseball left in us here.
It's funny you say that, because when I looked, I usually do a little. I mean, we bring on a lot of people that we know, right? But like, you look to kind of just see like, hey, how long are they have they been there, so that I don't sound like an idiot when we go through this. And I saw 6 years, and I was like, 6 years. They're like, that seems like wow, really?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like COVID just spun, it morphed time.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. And even just, I'm looking back at, you look at your seniors, and you kind of reflect back on their time. And, we were actually just talking about this at practice earlier today. Is like, their first year was it was just a crazy time for everybody, and baseball wise, it just shrunk down. It shrunk down the reps, it shrunk down the practices, it shrunk down the games, and time marches on. So it's amazing that I look back and go, I can't believe I've been here for 6 years. I feel like I just got here.
I know. No, it's awesome. I saw 6. I was like, wow, am I that old?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I'm so we're excited to have you on. But first question to kick this off before we really start getting really into the college baseball recruiting landscape and just talking baseball. How do you guys go about identifying players that you recruit at Colby?
Yeah, Colby's such a unique place. I think that we've got to really get out. Number one, we've got to get out and find players that are good enough to play in our conference. And the NESCAC is such a competitive conference, and good teams from top to bottom, and every weekend it's a grind. And so number one, I think you've got to find baseball players that are also very good students that can get into Colby and do the work at Colby, but also value that sort of double-edged sword. I think that there's a lot of kids that want to go to play college baseball. There's a lot of kids that want to go to elite academic schools. You've got to find the kids that truly want to do both. And so that's number one. And I think that one of the things that we've always valued about our recruiting process is that we have such good relationships with the people who know who those kids are. And, that's something that I learned, back when I was at Wheaton, is that you can't be everywhere, at the same time. You're not going to see every kid, but you can see the kids that you're supposed to see. And the way that you're able to do that is you have to have the contacts and you have to have the relationships of people that I think, one, know the kids and know, the type of kids that are good fits for the schools that we're at. But I also think that it's important to use those contacts so that they know the type of kid that plays well for you or will do well in your program. If they know me as a person and they know what type of coach I am, I think that really helps a lot towards steering us both together in the right direction. So I think identifying, those kids that are interested in the type of education that we provide at Colby, but also have a true passion for playing baseball and being challenged, because that's what this conference does.
Yeah, it's one of the best in Division III baseball. I think you said something that is, you said a couple things, but the one thing that always stuck out to me, because when I got into Division III coaching, I had no real feel or understanding of what like kind of the academic world was like. And going from coaching Division II and Division I, and then getting into, Division III at RPI, where there's a super high STEM focus. And that's a different kid that you're recruiting. Like, you can't just necessarily, like, similar to that, like, you can't just show up at a game, like you're a Division I guy, and be like, okay, who are the best guys on the field? Chances of them being able to, we'll figure out the academics after that. And it's not to necessarily say that you're not doing that. You don't reverse it and be like, well, who can get into school and then who can play? Like, you still want it to be like, to your point, and Carl Steffen, who I worked for at RPI, and he won close to 900 games at the Division III level and coached for 35 years. He's still coaching. He's assistant at Sage. Like, he would say that all the time. Like, I'm not looking for guys who play baseball. We are looking for baseball players who happen to be incredibly smart and want to be engineers. And there's a distinct difference in that. And I think it's hard when, like, we know that as coaches, and then trying to get that out, like, to explain that and talking to families, and when you're recruiting, like, there's a huge difference between like the guy who just wants to play baseball, but it's more of a kind of, not necessarily a hobby, but it's like, I can take it or leave it. And the guy who's like, I want to be in the cages, I want to develop, I want to get better, I want to compete, while also being unbelievably good academically. And there's a huge difference in that, and a distinction that I think at the high end academic level, like, that's what we're all looking for. Not me anymore, but that's what I was looking for. That's what you guys look for. That's what everyone is looking for at that level.
Yeah. And you hit it right. Like, those kids, that are like truly invested in baseball. Like, we don't get the touch points that the Division I schools get. Like, we're limited in practice time, and we don't play as many games. And so, but we all want our players to develop the same. We want them to have that same growth. We want them to make the same jumps. We want them to improve their foot speed. We want them to improve their power. We want them to improve defensively on the mound. Like, we all want the same things, but we don't get the same touch points. So, like, how do our kids improve at the same rate, over the same time frame? And it's because of the type of kid that we're getting, and being able to sort of reflect on both. Like, when I was at BC and I was at Notre Dame, like, I'm with them too much, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
There were times where I felt like I needed to step away and let them figure some stuff out on their own, but here at Colby, I think that because we identify, I think that passionate baseball player that also, comes with a skill set, but also, is a great student. Those kids are the ones on our campuses that are making the right decision daily. They're building into their day, something on the athletic side for improvement, whether that's their lift or their arm care stuff or their recovery or mobility work, or it's, cage work or extra defense stuff, or whatever it may be, as far as baseball is. There's something about their day that involves them becoming a better player and improving for our team and improving for themselves. And I think that that's it's a special person because they also have to make those same decisions academically, because just like their time at practice isn't enough for them to do, or to get all the reps and improvement that they want to have. It's the same in the classroom. Like that's why there's homework. That's why there's research. That's why there's things that they have to do outside of the classroom. And we always say our classroom's a baseball field, and like when they leave the classroom, there's still more work to be done. And I think the kids that we've been able to get here at Colby, I think that they have that mindset coming in. And then, while they're here, they seem to be the ones that are improving and getting better and consequently improving our program.
We used to have this conversation. I was coaching all the time. Like to your point, like the field being your classroom. Like I always say to my guys, like you guys put in, if you want to get, I see all your GPAs. If you're above a 3.3 and above, like you guys are putting in more effort in order to get those grades. Yeah. Like I was a Division I baseball player. I did the bare minimum from a school standpoint. Like, it was a little bit more like baseball heavy. That said, like if you want to be good at baseball, you have to put in more time at the college level. Like you can't just show up from like very rarely are you just going to show up from a skill set standpoint and be able to just be the dude the time you set foot on a college campus, because the game is different at the college level. It's more physical. It's faster. There's a lot more that you actually need to know. Like there's so much more that goes into the college game that you don't know yet. And being like, you have to actually be a student of the game and try to start figuring things out on your own. And I think there's a little bit of an argument at the Division III level. Like I think, and I've said this before, like I think the better coaches as an overarching umbrella are at the Division III level, because you have to cover so much in such a short period of time. Because you're right, you don't, we used to only get 16 days. Do you guys have fall baseball right now?
We have 10 practices in the fall.
So you have 10. Like,
yeah,
not enough. You know what I mean? Like, think about when you're playing Division I baseball. Like, when you're at Notre Dame and you get what, 35, 40 days in the fall,
45 days, I think. Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you get everything. Like even when you had 16 days, it's like, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. Like what are we going to cover here? And like, there's so much that you have to go over. And it sometimes gets to the point where it's like, do we even put in some of our team Ds and stuff? Because I don't even know if they're going to we're going to cover them in September when we didn't have turf. Like, are they going to remember in January or February?
No, they're going to forget it by then. Yeah,
we might as well scrap that and we'll cover that stuff in February.
Yeah,
but there's so much more. And I tell the story all the time. Like when my freshman year, we were doing double cuts, dude. I had no idea. I just remember Andy standing at second base screaming at me to figure it out. And I'm like, I've never done a double cut. Like, I don't know what this is. But it's just a small little thing that goes on in college baseball that if you've never been taught it and you don't know it, like you're already behind. And there's so much more. And I think the high academic world, like those kids can make up a little bit more ground because they want to do it in the classroom, and they're also like they've never necessarily failed, so they want to do it on the field too. And when they start to when they start to get older and they figured it out a little bit, like you can see gains a lot faster on those guys. And like I always found that to be super interesting at the Division III level with those high academic kids. Like they're going to struggle with failure, but like they're going to do everything in their power to really, really try to not to figure out why they're failing.
Yeah, I joke around that there's two things. Well, first of all, the thing you talked about Division III coaches being some of the best in the country, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I'm a Division III guy, so I came from, that's how I started. I'm so glad that I did. I think it really helped me at BC and it helped me at Notre Dame, and certainly is helping me now. But I think we don't have we don't have all the resources that we've got a lot of nice things. But it's not a blank check. It's not, we don't have all the technology. We've got some of it. We don't have all the, some of the equipment that these other places have. And I think the biggest part is like, we don't have the touch points. So we've got to be able to, reach our kids quite honestly quicker, and we've got to, I think the big part is like, we've got to understand our players much faster. And we've got to, and what I mean by that more is like, we've got to understand what is the best way to communicate with them and be able to get them to grasp concepts faster, because we just don't have the runway that other places do. And then when you talked about like our guys don't handle failure very well, they don't. And I say all the time, like, I got some C's on my on some grades back growing up. I got some B's. I may have even got lower than that. But like, and I think that's, my experience by not doing so well on those tests or those papers along the way. Quite honestly, I didn't know it in the moment, but it allowed me to kind of like, I wasn't shell shocked. I just didn't get it done on that paper. I didn't put the effort in, or I didn't focus enough, or, I was trying to get it done too quick. I rushed through it, and so like in baseball, if I struck out or if I made a bad play, like I didn't really dwell on it as much, I think, as someone who's, hasn't had the experience of those bumps and bruises along the way. So, like I laugh all the time and like tell our guys, like, I'm glad I got some of those C's along the way.
No, I know. It's funny. Like when I first started coaching at the high academic world, I was like, you're gonna strike out. It's okay. Like that's part of this game.
Yeah.
And like sometimes, I used to make the analogy all the time, and I say it on here a lot. Like I used to tell my guys all the time, like you're gonna hit 400, and people are gonna be like, "Yo, like what are you doing? Like that dude can flat out hit. Like you knocked down a 40 on your chemistry test here. Like no one is coming to you for chemistry help. Like you know what I mean? It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. Of like." Yeah. Hey, you knocked down a 40, like ain't no one on this team going to be like, hey, can you tutor me in chemistry? Like, no, man, like,
exactly. Yeah.
But like, you go hit 400, people are going to be like, hey, what is this guy doing that I'm not, because he's really good. And I think sometimes like it's a hard thing for really anybody to kind of wrap their mind around, but like that, like, especially younger guys. Cause I think, especially nowadays, you like, with the way that high school baseball and travel baseball and everything is kind of spread out and set up, like generally speaking, like we're recruiting the best players off of, the high school teams that they go to. Like they're the ones that are going to play in college, and they have a lot of success in high school. And like, it is inevitable you're going to fail when you get to college. And I think I think it's an interesting thing to talk about right now, because we're kind of at that point in the season, whether it's Division 1 or 3, where like, you're a quarter of the way, a little bit more, and into the season where like now we're getting into conference play, where the guys who have earned the right to play quite a bit are the guys who are going to be in the lineup a lot. And sometimes it's not always going to be freshmen. And it's not, I think sometimes, and I'm sure you get these questions when you have kids on campus, because I always did, like, do you play freshmen? Like, yeah, man, like I'm going to play the best 9 guys to give us an opportunity to win. Like, I don't care if you're a 6-year senior or a 17-year-old freshman, does not matter. But you have to produce. And I think that like, there comes a point in time for every freshman where it's like, do I even belong here? Like, it could be in the fall, it could be now, it could be it could be in the weight room, it could be in the class, like anywhere. But at some point you're going to go through some sort of adversity. And I think that that's where like, it becomes huge as coaches and for these kids to understand, like, because I think it's easy nowadays, and we can get into this later, but like, I think the transfer portal in some, like, I don't hate it, but I think in some instances it makes it easy for kids to be like, yo, I'm out. Like, I didn't get what I wanted. It's a little bit like, this is a little bit tougher than I thought it would be, so I'm out. Whereas when we grew up, it was like, if you jump in, like, you got to sit out a year. There's a lot more red tape you got to cut. So like, you sucked it up and you figured it out. And for better or worse, like, that's what it is. And I think sometimes like you're going to face that adversity. And I always kind of felt like, and I don't know, this is anecdotally, I would say, but I feel like at the high academic world where I lived in for 10 years and you've been in for a while, like those kids are generally like, they're going to try to figure it out a lot longer than the like, I'm out. I didn't get what I wanted. I'm leaving.
Yeah, and I think that like I tell our guys all the time, like as freshmen, I don't think you realize like, hey man, we're gonna play, we're playing Trinity this weekend, and like 7, 8, 9 in their lineup. Those guys were 2, 3, 4 in high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and the guys that are sitting on the bench, like those guys were all stars too. Like,
Mhm.
and I know that everybody plays on like really good travel teams and high school programs and stuff, but like there's kids on those travel programs that don't go play college baseball. There's kids on
Mhm.
there, there's many on their high school teams that don't go play college baseball, and I think that at some point, like if they were to reflect back to their time as a freshman, most, if not all of them, like they were just happy to get a uniform at that point. You know what I
Right.
mean? If they did make the varsity team, or,
Mhm.
with whatever program they were on, you lose sight of that quickly because, then, as juniors and seniors, they're having success and they're getting accolades and they're playing on these great travel programs and they're playing in these big tournaments against, kids that are going to big name schools and they're getting hits off them, or whatever the case may be. But, they've had a lot of success over that short period of time leading right in going into college. And then all of a sudden, you're playing with kids that are, 4 years older than you
Yep.
again, and, I think that like we as coaches, we have perspective on that. And it's hard for them to have perspective because, the first time it happened when they were freshmen, they were 13, 14 years old, like they didn't have perspective on anything in life at that point.
Nope.
And now they're 18 and, they've got a little bit more, but still not enough. So I think it's important for us, to be able to relay that to them and communicate that to them. And I think the other thing about your point of like kids at the academic, these some of the schools, certainly like a place that I coach or that you've been at. I think they're those kids have such a limited pool of schools that they're interested in because of their academic accolades that I think they actually are, a lot of times can be like super thorough on the school of their choice, and
Right.
I think that really helps them. And I would give this advice to others too. Like, I think it's important to ask the question that you said, like, hey coach, do you play freshman? And also say like, well, what if I don't play as a freshman? What does my year look like? What does, what if you were to project the lineup for next year, like what does it look like? Why is it that you're recruiting me? Like, where do you see me?
Mhm.
I think those are super important questions, so that like I tell them all the time, like when I first started coaching and started recruiting, like it was about player acquisition, man. Like I wanted the best players on the field, and like what I calling them, getting them to campus, like hopefully trying to say the right thing that he wanted to hear or that mom and dad wanted to hear. And the longer I did it, the more I realized all I want to do is be genuine and show them what we do.
Mhm.
Show them who I am, show them the different unique things. Like we do disc profiles and player development plans. And like, like we do a lot of unique stuff at Colby. And if they know that and they choose Colby, when they get here, like there's going to be so many things that are new and fresh and different, but there's going to be a lot of things that they expected.
Mhm.
And I think that has helped us like tremendously, like the break-in period. And then, the our guys know that like I expect them to make mistakes, and that not every freshman's going to play unless, they prove that they're the best man for the job. But I think that, those are like critical questions that the kids should be asking all the coaches that they're talking to, because once you get there, man, like you want to be as productive as you can. And those guys that aren't in the lineup, they can be as productive as the guys that are in the lineup. And if you feel like a part of the thing, and then there's also like a personal side of it that like you need to know that, hey, even if I don't play, there's a plan for me here. Like I'm a valued member of the program, and Yeah, my time in the lineup is not right now, but because of the work that I'm doing and because of the plan that I'm on here, my time's going to come. My opportunity is going to come, and hopefully I take advantage of it. But I think that that's really, really important for kids to ask those questions and be able to do their own research too, and fact check some things, and make sure that in this day and age now, I mean, the COVID years are kind of dwindling down here, but like medical red shirts are around and kids transferring, and they're just sort of figuring out what the rosters are going to look like, what the opportunities are going to look like, and and hear it firsthand from the coach.
I think there's a lot that we can talk about in this, but like it's something that I recognized as I got older and when I became a head coach. Excuse me. And Joe Reyna talked about it when we had him on. Like when you come on campus, what I say to you better match up when you get to campus, right? Like, if we're recruiting you, like I'm not just going to make up everything and hope that you're going to show up, and then you get there and you're like, everything he told me is like 20% true. And I think the other part, and Traz talked about this too, and Traz and I have talked about this before when I first became a head coach, because he'd been a head coach for a long time, is like, to your point, like I was trying as an assistant, like I was just trying to kind of get like the best players that I could, and like, here we go. And then I became like, now all of a sudden you're in charge, and it's a wildly different experience being a head coach than it is an assistant. Oh, yeah. I started to realize, luckily I had a lot of people who were really good and better coaches than I was and had done it that I could talk to as mentors. But like figuring out the guys like in the recruiting process that weren't going to be able to mesh with me or my coaching style. And I think sometimes that's tough to do, because I think sometimes like you pass on kids that are good. I think as a kid sometimes, like, now that we're on the other side, it's like, hey man, it's not because you're not good. It's just some other thing. Like usually it's like, well, they have 4 middle guys. Like they don't need a 5th, whatever it is. Right. But like sometimes it's like, listen, man, like I don't think that kid is going to mesh well with me or even into the program. And like you start to learn, like you can't sacrifice those things in order to bring, because in the long run, it'll be more detrimental than it will be a positive. So I think that those are some of the things, like, and I think it's hard for like when you're a kid to kind of hear the no's from coaches, because like you're going to hear no, but I like try to frame it too. Like you're going to say no more than you're going to say yes in this process anyways. Like the ultimate goal is to say yes once. Like you're going to say no hopefully a handful more times than that, so that getting understanding those types of questions and things that you can go in and ask, like you shouldn't be afraid to go in and ask some questions about what did it what does your plan do freshman play, all those types of things. Like what does development look like? Are you guys in the weight room? Like what's important to you, because you want to make the most informed decision that you possibly can going to that school. Like you don't want to show up at Colby and be like, everything Coach Woods told me was not true. Like, yeah, and it's not that that's a thing, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't really like this stuff. Like, well, then you probably shouldn't have chosen that school. Right. And I think a lot of kids get jammed up a little bit more, and families, because they choose things for the wrong reasons versus identifying what it is that they are really, what they value and what they want out of their experience. And then finding the program that's going to check all those boxes for them, versus being like, Division I, here we come. And there's no, and it kind of gets that, everyone in this game gets, mad about it, because it's like, oh, they're chasing Division I. And like, we've said it a lot, and this is true because you coached at a lot of levels. Like, there's a lot of Division III programs that are really, really good. And your experience from a college baseball standpoint is going to be far better than a Division I out there. And I'm not going to name them, but we all know, we know who they are. You're going to have a far better experience. You're going to win. You're going to compete nationally, versus going and being 10-50, 10-46 and getting your teeth kicked in for 19 weeks. That's not fun. And I think sometimes people fall into that trap, and it's like, you need to identify what it is that you are interested in and what you want out of your experience. And it doesn't matter to division. Like, and we can get into this too. Like, there's 20 less draft rounds. There's a
Yeah.
lot of really good college baseball players that are showing up on campus that used to not.
Yep.
They're going to the best programs. Those guys that used to kind of be roster fillers, they're going down.
Right.
And then the guys that used to be there, it's all going to trickle down.
Right.
And, we talk about this all the time. Like, go watch college baseball. Show up and watch Trinity and Colby this weekend. Like, it's high-level baseball. Like, it's not, and people get this idea that Division III is like, oh, it's like 13th grade. I'll walk around. Like, no, man. Like, there's dudes who have velo, who have plus breaking stuff, and there's physical dudes in that lineup who can play defense and can hit. Like,
yeah, that I think that's another good piece of advice too. Is like, I think people try that, like they'll go, yeah, well, the kid that played, in the next town over from me, he's going to Bowdoin. Like, I know what a NESCAC player looks like. Like. That's one guy, man. Go watch the team play. Like, and I think it's really important for them to see, see the team play, see the level of play, see how the team is like in the dugout. Like, are they, some dugouts are different from others. See the coach on the field, see how he's interacting with players. Like, I think there's a ton of information to gain there, and I don't think it's done enough, and I think also like that piece on like asking, like part of when I sit down with a family, like there's a lot of information that I want to get to them, but then once I've gotten the stuff that I want to get there, the most important time is when they ask me questions, because one, I want them to get the answers that they need, but two, like I also want to know like what's important to them. When they ask me questions about our peak performance, when they ask you questions about our strength coach, when they ask, what do our guys do on the weekends when they don't have baseball? What does a typical day look like? How do they balance the academics and all the baseball decisions that they have to make? What do our guys do for fun? What's the social life like on campus? What's downtown Waterville like? What's Portland like? Like what are some of the things that the kids can do by coming to Maine? Like all of those things, and there's many more. Like those are questions that I absolutely want to field. Like I want them to be able to ask those questions because it tells me a little bit about the kid. It allows me to get an idea of like, hey, this kid's going to fit in, man. Like he's into this, like this is, I think, a good spot for him.
Well, you're recruiting. I think the one thing too that shines through is like when you're recruiting kids and you're recruiting the family just as much as the family is recruiting you. And you can tell a lot when kids come in and sit in your office and like, look, there is a stark difference. And when you've done this long enough, like it's their first or second visit and people are nervous. They don't really know. And like, you get that vibe. And then like, usually like you can throw a couple, like talk about a couple things. Then the questions start coming versus like mom and dad ask every single question. And it like, to me, it was wouldn't say a red flag, but it's like, okay, like, does this kid, is this really what he wants to do? Is this where he wants to be? Or is this kind of being driven a little bit more by mom and dad?
Yeah,
and
I think
that doesn't mean that like mom and dad can't ask questions. Like you want to ask like, financial aid and support and like what type of, all of those types of questions, like absolutely have at it. Like, hey, if there's a question that your son forgot because you're a parent and an adult, you remember it, like, yeah, ask it. But when it's driven by mom and dad, like for me, it was always like, like, is this kid, does he really want to be here? Is this an interest of him? I think the other interesting thing that I always paid attention to, which I know a lot of people do, like the interaction between the kid and mom and dad or whoever it is, because like that tells you like, I've said it, like there's at least two kids that I can distinctly remember, like I passed on because they came on campus and they were horrific to their parents. And I was like, man, if you're that way to your parents, like, how am I going to coach you? Or what's going to happen when I have to tell you like, no? And I just don't want to deal with it. And like you can like that, like little things like little tells like that start to add up, and you're like, you know what? Like I'm going to go in a different direction.
Yeah, well, it's your job. Like, I mean, these families that you bring in, like it's not how it was 20, 30 years ago. Like when we were playing, it was like the parents are not part of it back then. Like they're there and they're cheering and like my parents used to take my laundry home and do that for me every once in a while, or bring me a sandwich, but the involvement of parents now, and I'm a parent of a 10-year-old, and like I'm involved in as much of it as I can. You know what I mean? And so like it's just the way that we raise our kids and the involvement level that we are now all a part of. And I say we because I'm part of this as well. And I don't want to sound like I'm pointing the finger. Once they come to college, like you're still going to be involved and you're still going to have influence over the performance of your child. And that influence is going to either be positive or if it's going to be negative. And we have to, because it's our job, we have to listen and make decisions, and if we get the vibe that like this could go south, we can't bring it in. And one of the things I'm like so thankful for is like the families that we have at Colby, and I've been like incredibly lucky, and I'm trying to continue to bottle this recipe that we have here. Like we have like these parents influence our team so positively. They influence their own kids, they influence others. They're so supportive. Like it has absolutely improved our program's play by the families that we have. And I think that like that's something that, absolutely I pay attention to and ask questions, quite honestly. Like when we talk to their coaches, hey, how's mom and dad? Are they crazy? Like, are they yelling at umpires? Are they yelling at coaches? Are they trying to tell you how to do your job? Because there's plenty of parents out there that do that stuff. And that's, I would say the vast majority don't want those as part of our programs, because it's just going to hurt the team. At some point, it'll hurt the team. And so, I think that those are things that we're looking for actively and things that we're listening to anytime we get the chance to.
I think it's important because and it's something you started with today too, being able to trust the people that you can trust to be able to kind of get you in front of the kids that you should be in front of. But to take it a step further, like if you're talking, like when you call high school coaches like I did, like usually that's one of the, whether or not you ask the question, they usually will offer it up too. Like you might not ask like, hey, how is mom and dad? Like at some point in that conversation, you'll be like, hey, mom and dad are, or hey, great family, great parents, don't hear anything from them.
Yeah.
Like there's
or
not an
I don't
issue
know.
there.
I've never even really talked to him. And I'm like, okay, great. Right. This kid's, he's standing on his own 2 feet doing this himself, or if mom and dad are influencing the background, they're doing a good job, but
it's funny because when I grew up, like my parents didn't go to college. So the whole recruiting process was just like, they had no idea. Yep. My parents were young when they had me. So like, my parents were in their early 30s going through this. Like they had no idea. Like, looking back at it, I'm like, how did we do this? Like, I don't even know how this happened, but like, it's, for my parent, like they were, very, I don't want to say hands off because they weren't, like they were involved, but it wasn't, ultimately it was my decision. It was all like, all of us were like, we don't really know what we're doing here. Like, let's just find a place that we find like that you're going to feel comfortable going to. And my parents were super comfortable with where I ended up going to school. And, it was a great decision, but like, to your point, like 20 years ago when we went through that process, like there wasn't really there was not a lot of what we do. There wasn't this, and there still isn't. Like, I'm floored at the amount of information that people just don't know.
Yeah.
Like that's readily available to know. Like I saw a tweet today from someone put out who does some, advising stuff that was like, if you're not talking to any coaches, you should call me. And it's like, well, that's wildly misleading. Like, if you're a 26 or 27, like, nobody's talking to you.
Right.
If you're a Division III kid right now and was a 25, like, you might have a handful of schools that are talking to you if you went to events last year and did well and you haven't popped yet. Like, and that's, it creates a little bit of fear and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's why, like, you can go on the internet and see when people can talk to you. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, you can Google it. Like, when can Division I college coaches talk to me? Like, August 1st, going into your junior year of college or high school. Like, before that, they can't. So, like, it's, the rules change, but just like the lack of just general information, I think, is like, which is why we do this podcast and we have these conversations to talk about this, because you have people that are really good at what they do. The coaches that we bring on talking about this stuff, where it's like, hey, like, this is normal. Like, and the analogy I use to people is like, you've watched for a decade, if not more, of just an arms race of guys committing. And it comes to a screeching halt, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, because I don't think anyone wants to be the first school to be like, we committed a 26. Yeah, right. And it's going to slow everything down. And, people are like panicking right now of like, I haven't talked to anyone. Like, man, you can't. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's always plenty of time. Like the only deadlines that we have to go on are admissions deadlines. And those are hard lines that we have to sort of draw. But we all of us, we have a long runway. And the other thing that I would say is, like, if you're not, if it's a little bit later, you just haven't impressed the right coach yet, and the right coach is a relative term, right. That is different for every player, and I think that, like, that's the important part for kids to know the type of player they are, and knowing that their skill set might not be valued by every coach, and I think a lot of kids just feel like, well, I run a 6.7, I throw 90 from the outfield, and like my exit velocity is 92. Like, I'm a Division I player, and you might be, but you might not be the right player for that coach. They might not be looking for that. They might value the guy that, does things a little bit differently. And I think that's one of the things that like, I try to, any kids that ask, like, like, what are you looking for? Like, I mean, like, there's certain needs that we have, but it's so much more than the skill set, man. Like, we want to watch how you play, and when we see how you play, then we make decisions on whether or not we want you to play for us. And
I think it's interesting because we're now in an era of data. Like, there's so much data that's available for college, for baseball in general, that wasn't really around obviously it wasn't around when we played. But, especially over the last 10 years, like, it's gotten to the point where, like, you can have Rapsodo at the Division III level, and, like, you might not have TrackMan, but you have something that is giving you data on hitters and pitchers. And I think that, like, you have a generation of kids that are coming up throwing on it and having an understanding of what it is. And they kind of think like, well, I haven't, to your point, like, yeah, I have a 92 exit velo. And, like, we had Billy Soleno on, and Billy was like, and we talked about data and how to use it and, leverage it and, stuff like that. And, we can talk about that for a second, but, like, Billy's like, I don't know, like, we don't play in a carnival. Like, I don't know what that means, hitting a ball off a tee. Like, that's not moving or sinking or running in on your hands or going away or has rise through the zone. Like, I just don't know. Like, yeah, it's awesome. Like, it's kind of a data point that we can have, but I don't know what exactly that means from, just because you have those numbers doesn't mean that everybody is going to recruit you, to your point. And I think that, like, that's hard because you see the data that's out there, like, and like, people will tweet it out after weekends, like, the hardest hit ball, 106 and 104, and, like, awesome. But, like, you got to do it in the game. And I think that that's one thing that, it becomes a little bit harder for younger kids to kind of realize, like, you can throw as hard as you want to a Rapsodo with a catcher or a 9 pocket when there's no hitter and no umpire and the game doesn't matter and there's no runners on base. And like, yeah, I've seen a lot of guys who are 87, 89, and then you get them in game and they're like 84, 85, because there's wind and it's not controlled setting and there's a hitter and there's an umpire and there's pressure and there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think that that's why recruiting is not necessarily an exact science and why we show up to watch guys play. Because if we just all recruited off of numbers, you're going to miss guys. Because how many guys have we've seen at, show ball where we've both been there. It's a great event. Like there's a lot of guys who are there, but that, they run like a 7-0 and they're a middle infielder and you're like, okay actions. And then all of a sudden you watch it play in the game and you're like, damn, like this kid plays faster than a 7-0 and he gets off the ball and he makes all the plays. And then conversely, you're like, yo, this kid ran a 6-6 and it's like, can't hit himself out of a wet paper bag. Like you can't steal first, and like, that's why you got to watch it.
Yeah. And I think that like, that's something that like gets missed. People like throw their hands up. Like I run a 6-6. I'm a guy, like, yeah, I just watched you play shortstop and you couldn't get to the backhand ball in the hole, but you run a 6-6. So, like, I mean, it has to translate, or whatever your numbers are, like you got to play better than that in the game. And I think that, like, that's where I think we certainly at the Division III level, like that's where, we do so well in recruiting is we probably, like we don't have the luxury of focusing on all those, like, where like when I was in Notre Dame, like, yeah, if I could look at those things and I could go find the shortstop that also ran the 6-8, and could get to the backhand ball in the hole, so like, but here, like we those numbers, while give us information, they don't paint the full picture. And I think also like it goes back to like listening to them talking to their coaches, watching how they interact with their parents. Like those things are much more magnified, I think, to the coaches that are doing it at a high level, whether that's Division III or Division I, because those things really tell the story of like the type of person we're going to get, which leads to the type of player that we're going to get.
Yeah, and I think like, especially with pitching, like we had Hobbs on and a bunch of other, Ray Hedrick at Randolph-Macon and a couple other guys we've talked about this with too. Like, you can be, especially data for pitchers, because we've kind of unlocked the velo thing from a baseball standpoint. But like, if you want to pitch in college, doesn't matter the level, whether it's 1, 2, 3, JUCO, NAI, like you can throw as hard as you want. But velo doesn't scare anybody anymore. Like when you and I played years ago, like dudes who were like mid 90s, you're like, yo, this dude's firm. Because there weren't a lot of them. Now,
you guys throwing 90.
Right.
90 was the number.
I know.
Like
I was in high school and being like, yo, this dude throws 90. And I was like, damn, like this dude's firm. And, and then you get to college and, we faced a couple of guys, like we faced 2 5th-rounders who were 95. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
But even like Eric Bolak, who pitched I grew up playing against him in high school, and he pitched at Lemoyne. He was like all of 93. He was like one of the hardest throwers in the MAC. Got drafted, played a bunch of years, got AAA. Like that was firm. Now it's like you flip on ESPN Plus on a weekend, and it's like every dude is 94 to 96, and you're like, what? But the flip side to it in the college game, like you have to have something to go with it. Like you can't just like the velo doesn't necessarily scare. Right. We got to throw strikes. You have to have some semblance of an off-speed pitch. Yep. And then like the thing that I think a lot of guys struggle with, especially younger pitchers, like you get to college, you can't be a 1.5 or a 1.6 and think that you're going to pitch in the college game. Like it's a track meet. So you have we've had a couple guys that we worked with who are, went to college and are pitching. Like I'm struggling to get innings because I can't figure out how to be, less than a 1.5 right now. And like one telling them like, hey, it's okay. Like they're working with you on doing this. It's gonna click eventually. Yeah. But like you've also done this your whole life. You can't expect this to actually happen in a month and be like, okay, now I'm a 1-3.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more that goes to this, and being able to field your position and understanding where you have to be. And, especially if you're going to pitch in the back half of games, and if you're going to, I know people are against the bunt nowadays, but like if you're going to coach, if you're playing Division III baseball, like you better be able to field your position at any point in time, especially in the back half of games. Because if it's a tight game, which 50% of your games at the Division III level are going to be 1 or 2 run games, like people are going to bunt. Like leadoff walk, you bet your bottom dollar that next dude is bunting. And everyone in the yard knows. Even your grandmother who's never seen college baseball knows, like, this guy's probably going to bunt here. Like, so you got to be able to field your position. If you can't, like, then it becomes, like, as coaches, it's like, man, like, we can't go to him because the likelihood of him throwing it down the right field line or, first and second, he turns and spins and throws it to second and no one's covering, like, he doesn't even know the defense. And those, like, all of those things are paramount in our game. And I think that that's where people kind of get, jammed up too of like, I throw 95 and why, I don't pitch a lot. Like, you're also 20% strikes with no breaking ball and you're a 1-9 to the plate. Like, I can't put you in unless it's a clean inning and we're up or down a lot.
Yeah, fastballs don't separate, man. Like, fastballs don't separate anymore the way that they did before. And I think the separator is in all that other stuff. Like the guy that can slide step and throw strikes, the guy that can mix his looks and holds, the guy that can, spin it or has, some sort of secondary pitch. That's the separators now. And I mean, like, it's all good for the game. The game has improved. You and I also wouldn't have been as successful back then if the game was played at this level that it is now. So that's good. We got we came up at the right time. But I think
we talk about it all the time. Like, I don't know if I'd be I don't identify as a Division I baseball player anymore. I'm 37 years old, married with a kid and a second on the way. Like, I don't walk around like, oh, I played Division I baseball. But like, I don't know if I would have been a Division I player nowadays. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I could catch, but like, I don't know that I would. And I think I probably would have played a Division III somewhere, but I don't know if I am or not. Like, it's just it's a far different game. Like, it's a lot more physical. Like, it's not and I noticed it over my last 5 years, and you're living it still. Like, how physical are you? You know what I mean? Like, your guys are in the weight room, I'm assuming.
I can't get over our guys now. Like, I can't even. Like, our guys are in the weight room too much now. But I mean, like, even just watching our team, like, when they walk through the gate, I'm like, all of them they're all in good shape. They're all big. They're all strong. They're all, they look athletic. I mean, it's just, they pass the eye test, much more than I ever did. And, much more than my teammates did back when I was playing. And, we had some really good players there. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I went to I took my wife down to New Paltz for their game last weekend, and Marist was at home against Niagara. So I haven't been to campus in like 10 years, so I swung by to see all the upgrades and everything. And I watched both teams hit in the cages. I watched Marist hit for a little bit, and I watched Niagara for a little bit before I left. But like the physicality of like top to bottom, all of the guys that were hitting, I was like, this is not. Like, this wasn't what it was like when I played. Like, none of like these guys, the average of these guys is like what some of our bigger guys looked like. Right. Yeah. When we played, and it's just like, you walk by their weight room and it's like this. I mean, they got like 40 squat racks. Like, and when I played, we had like 6. The investment in that side of things is so much more prevalent and kind of in your face. And I think it's not like, when we grew up, it was like, like, you can't get too big, like, you're going to get stiff, and you can't throw, and you can't hit, and you can't run. And now it's like, no, man, just, it's going to help you in everything you can do. And I like it, and it does. Like, I got bigger when I was in college. Like, I played around 215, and I was a catcher. Like, but I would lose weight during the season. Like, and I needed to. Like, the other thing that I think a lot of kids don't understand when they get to our game at the college level, like, you've never gone through a season that you are about to, like, your freshmen are going through a season right now that they've never had to go through. The lead up, the travel, the games, the class. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane.
Oh, and that like schoolwork takes they're studying more, like especially freshmen, like every day's a new day. And like you're sleeping in a foreign place. You've got to, like you might not room with a baseball player. So you might be, with
Hmm.
someone you've never met before, and you don't have the same you don't have the same schedule. You don't have the same interests. Um, that's that's going to try to push performance down. You're eating new food. You're not eating mom and dad's food that you grew up on or that you could count on every day. You got to make choices,
Hmm.
about what you're eating. Before mom and dad are the ones making the decisions most of the time, right? And then, you're like baseball wise, it's all heightened. Everything that you're doing, schoolwork's all heightened. Everything that you're doing, and I think all those things can pull away from performance, and I think nowadays, like these kids are wired, so different, and they got to make the choices to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it,
Hmm. I thought the interesting thing, my last two, well, notwithstanding COVID, but the last like 3 or 4 years of my freshman, I would sit down at the end of the year. Obviously, you have your exit meetings and stuff, and we'd talk. And almost every freshman would be like, "All right, like what you think of the year? Like whether they played or not." Like we had a lot of freshmen who played. Like, what you think? And like almost everyone would be like, the sheer amount of time that we spend was something that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to do, especially in season. But a lot of it was like, I mean, and we have turf. I know you guys have turf too. Like you're cutting down so much time when you have turf for game
Oh
days.
yeah.
And they're like,
Yeah.
game days, like, we play at 12, we're at the field at 9:30. You're not leaving till 6. And then during COVID, you're on a bus the next morning going somewhere. And, it's like, they're like, it's just the sheer amount of time. Like, I'm used to high school showing up 30 minutes before the game and
Yep.
doing some lame stretch and making 5 throws and being like, okay, let's play. And it's like, okay, we have a dynamic warm up where we do 1,000 things before we even touch a baseball.
Right.
And then we're into then we do our daily stuff, and then it's like, all right, like BP time, and then the other team takes BP, and then and we cut out watering and dragging and all
Right.
of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like they were just like just that sheer amount of time, like I wasn't necessarily prepared for, and it took me a while to adjust to. And I feel like looking back, I think it was something that took me a long time to adjust to as a freshman too. Like and that was before the turf, and you're on the field, pulling the tarp at 6:30 in the morning to then get it ready. Like, I
Those
mean,
top pulls. I don't miss those days.
no, 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 no,
I
no.
was I
Like,
would say the same thing. Like, yeah, and then, like also in high school, like I played hockey and I played baseball, and I I I I don't know, somehow got on the golf team too. But like that was there were other things that I was doing too, and quite honestly, like I didn't spend as much time on baseball until I was only playing baseball, and which was when I got to college, and so I know, and like last week we went to Florida. We played 4 games in 3 days. We had a day off and then played 4 games in 3 days. Like
mhm.
me as the coach, the second half of the trip, when I was waking up in the morning, I'm like, I'm smoked, but like I got to grind through it too. But it's like I'm thinking to myself, like, if I feel this tired, like, what do these guys feel like?
I know.
Luckily these guys are in great shape and they bounce back and they're young and they played great. But I like so many kids go through that where they and the only way really, Keith, like they just got to experience it. And it's
Mhm.
probably why all of us will say, like, hey, when do the kids make the biggest jump? It's like freshman to sophomore year. It's just like that's when
Yep.
they can handle everything. They can see around the corner. They know what they need to do. They've experienced their freshman year, which was for most of them very challenging. And then the sophomore year is like you can stay afloat. You can move down the stream on your own. It's like
Mhm.
That's why we see such growth as sophomores because of what they went through as freshmen. And I think that like that's the part that you know I try to talk about a lot is like, look, man, like I don't know who said it. It was some guy, some person smarter than me, but like I think they said, without struggle, there's no progress.
Mm.
Uh, and like you got to go through all that stuff in order to get to where you want to get to, and unfortunately in this day and age, like information is right at our fingertips all day long, and what we want is right. It's so instantaneous that, and we forget about that, and we want that to also be part of our baseball experience, and it's just not going to be.
No, it's too tough a game. What you mentioned it, and I'm interested to hear what you think about it. But what are your thoughts on dual sport athletes or whatever? Like you played three sports, I played three sports. Like you
I
don't
love
see
it,
it that
man.
much anymore.
I love to see kids. A kid tell me plays hockey. I love to, like, one. I just think it helps create a well-rounded person, and I think it, like on the competitive side, I think it creates a well-rounded competitor. Like, if you're able to figure out how to beat someone in another sport and gain some grit and some toughness or some some other characteristic that can benefit you in baseball. Like baseball is just such a unique sport. It's built around failure, and it's built around uncontrollables, and it's just it's like playing poker or playing cards or playing blackjack. Like you got to play the same way over and over and over and over again, and then you get to see how good you are, and then you might have to make some changes, and so like it's such a different sport. You're to be able to learn some things in other arenas. I think I think it's awesome, and I also think that like all of us, like you and I would go back to being 15, 16 years old again in a second if someone could tell you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of, the thing that I loved about being that age is that I got to play hockey all the time, is that I got to play golf on the golf team and got to play at some cool golf courses, and then I got to play baseball, but and I don't think that you have to forego your amateur hockey career, to be a college baseball player. Like,
Right.
if anything, I think it gives you good time off and it teaches you other skills that are going to help you on the baseball field. And to me, like I love it. I love when guys play other sports, and if you don't, and like baseball's your thing, well, then that's your thing and that's your passion. I'm cool with that too. But I would never tell someone like, don't play other sports and you're gonna get burnt out, man. Like I see it with my kid. He's 10, like he played like 60 hockey games this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end of the year, like he was ready for it to be baseball. He wouldn't say that,
Right.
but then like during the hockey season, I could barely get him to like go hit with me in the cages. He was just so into hockey. Now, like he was at practice today with our guys. He's working out with the catchers. He hit in every group on the field. He probably took 100 swings today, like,
Awesome.
and 2 months ago, like when he was around the team, guys were asking him what his favorite sport was, and he says hockey. And today they're like, "Don't you love baseball more than hockey?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do. I love baseball more." Like it's just I can't say enough positive things about kids that play more sports, whatever it is, football, hockey, golf, do something else, and it'll benefit you.
I think it's as a caveat, as a side note, I should say, my son is 2.5, and we were hitting off the tee in the living room today. So I was taking video and sending it to all my friends. Like, some of you guys need hitters. Like, you should take this guy. But I always thought like, I would never say no to somebody who just straight up played baseball. I just always thought that like to your point, like it gives guys a break because this game is such I hate calling recruiting a grind. Like the game is a grind though. Like you have to grind out a season and at bat, like everything. And so like you need that time away. And I always thought that like, for me, I always like growing up, like during football season, like I played football. And then during the winter I wrestled. And then when baseball came around, like it was baseball season. Until obviously when I got older, but even at that, like I played all three, and I didn't wrestle my senior year, which I regret, but that was because I caught and dislocated my knee the year before and couldn't really do anything, and I weighed a lot more and wasn't going to suck out a lot of like 30 pounds. So, but my point is like it gave me a break, but like I still got to compete in other things, and I thought that like. Especially for me, like I'm a hyper competitive person. Like, wrestling to me was like, like you don't get any pure form of kind of like you lose, like it's on you, man. Like, wasn't anyone else's fault on that mat. It was yours. I always
probably learned a lot from that for baseball wise. Like baseball failure is the most public thing that can happen. The ball, like people's eyes follow the ball around. When the pitcher makes a bad pitch, everybody knows who made the bad pitch. When the shortstop lets it go through his legs, everybody knows who made the mistake. You know what I mean? Like you watch a football game and someone misses a block, like
you don't catch it.
3/4 of the stadium don't even notice. A guy makes a bad play in hockey. Like no, you don't know until the instant replay happens.
Right.
It's just like those things in the moment don't show up. They're not as public. They're not as visible. And like our sport's completely different. And consequently, I think. That's part of what wears you down, is that you're putting yourself out there every pitch. And if the ball gets hit to you and you don't make the play, everybody knows that you screwed it up, and I think that like playing other sports gives you that break, but it also gives you perspective on like, hey man, that was just one play. It was just one pitch, like.
Well, I think the other thing too sometimes is like when you do play other sports, like you might be the best baseball player in your school, like you might not be the best hoops player, you might not be the best football player, like you're gonna have to work in order to get burned. In like I'm saying this is an umbrella term, like if you go to a super small school and there's only 12 kids on every team, like then it's a little bit different. But if you're at a bigger school, like you likely aren't the best football player, the best hoops player, and the best baseball player. Like those are Joe Mauer type guys. Like they're few and far between. So I think like it creates a little bit like the competitive part, but like that little bit of adversity at a young age of like, okay, like I got to figure this out a little bit if I want to get a little bit more burn because I'm not the dude on this team, and sometimes that, you can, it sets you up, I think, a little bit for success when you get to college, like regardless of the sport, because like the likelihood of you walking in on campus, whether it's baseball or not, like you're likely not going to be the dude as a freshman. Like it's going to be like, okay, that guy is the dude. What does he do right that I need to do better? And that like, and that's why like we always, we talk about this stuff as coaches, like we like the competition. Like even if you're the backup shortstop, like, hey man, you're doing everything right. He's just better than you right now in these couple things. But like you keep, and you like it because he's getting better. The starting guy knows he has to push himself to be better. And all of a sudden you have a really good baseball team.
Yeah, you got a rising tide lifts all boats, man. If everyone's getting better, like you got a pretty darn good team.
Oh, it's awesome. We touched on it a little bit, but like, do you guys do anything from a data standpoint in the recruiting process? Like, I know we talked about it a little bit, but is there anything that like you guys look for when you get the data and that you say like, okay, these are things that we've seen, or these are similar to guys that we have that we might be able to do something with?
Yeah, I think all data, the more information we can have on kids, the better, because we're what's gonna, any of it could tip the scale at any time, and I think like all the baseball metrics, they're important information to have. How much value we put into them can differ from player to player. It can differ from, recruiting year to recruiting year. But I think all of the baseball metric information is valuable, very, very, very valuable. I think the other part that we look for is like, I want to know how you did for your high school team. I want to know how you did for your travel team. I want to know, like, you know, what'd you hit? You know, like, what was your batting average? What, like, did you hit for power? How many doubles you hit? How many home runs you hit? I also want to know, like, how was the team? Like, you hit 440 and, had a bunch of RBIs. Like, how was your team? Like, how did you guys win? Did you guys lose? Did you, all of that is information. Like, we take kids that, played on championship caliber programs. Then we got some other kids who's, their senior years in high school, the team wasn't any good. But like, it's all valuable information for us to have. I would say by and large, more of us, I should say we want to build our rosters with more kids that are coming with hardware, and coming with championships. But that's not always going to be feasible for every kid that we bring in. Not every kid we bring in is going to be a state champion, but we want to bring them in from good quality programs that, have had success. But I think like that, those type of information bits are like, they hold an incredible amount of value to us. Do we make decisions based solely on those? No, but they influence us either positively or negatively. So like all of those information pieces we track on, like we've got a notes section on their high school season, and if we've got, whether that's like, hey, this kid hit third in the lineup for a team that, lost in the state championship and, he hit 420 this year. This kid was also the player of the year in the Middlesex League Conference, whatever the case may be. Those are things that are important for us to have. And then in the summertime, like, there's kids, they play in different tournaments, or, this kid played on the team that won this tournament, played on the team that, played in this tournament and he was named to the all tournament team. Those types of things can be valuable pieces of information for us. So, we've got in our database, like we've got sections on all of those things, and how much the kid can fill. I think they're better off, putting it all in there because it's all information that we value and want to have.
Yeah, I think it's like the more information we have, the better it is. But I think the high school part being important, I think is huge because I think there's some people that think it's not necessarily the most important. A, because it's early, and B, because we don't necessarily recruit those games a ton.
Yeah.
And it's not like, when Andy and I talk about this with our clients, we talk about it on here. Like, it's not because college coaches don't want to go see the games. It's because they're playing at the exact same time.
They're at the same time. Yeah.
Right. Like generally speaking, it's like Mondays are kind of the only day you might be able to get out just because of the way the schedule always works. So like it might be different, week to week, but by and large, like you're not, and you guys are in Maine, like you're not driving 7 hours down to Albany to watch a kid that you see hitting the 3-hole for a game. Like it's not a good spend time doing that.
Right.
But and the flip side to it, we had Brian Casey on, one of the legendary Casey family members. But like we talked, he's like, we were talking about the travel ball season, kind of how like, guys, like you throw 3 innings and then good or bad, you're going to throw 3 innings again next weekend, and good or bad, it's 3 innings next weekend. And like, sometimes it, like for us, it's a little like, it's hard, I think, sometimes to get your freshmen out of that. And even some of your younger guys, it's like, if you're bad on a weekend, like those innings are going to go to someone else who's good, unless I have a bunch of bad guys. Like it's like, the best guys are going to continue to pitch. Like it's not necessarily, but and in high school, I think, it gets magnified a little bit because you don't have 15 arms like you do in college, so like you got to parse through all of that as well. But like there is something to be said about being able to recruit guys that are, coming from successful programs or have had success. Yep. I think sometimes it does influence you one way or the other, right or wrong. But in the Albany area, I know with like those programs, and there's certain programs, like even if they have down years, they have really good coaches where you're like, well, they had a down year, but comes from a really good program. They
Right.
have a pedigree of success. Like they had a little bit of a down year this year, but the chances of them being down multiple years in a row, slim to none.
Yep.
Like, I know what I'm getting out of this kid should he, choose to come here, and kind of bring it full circle back what we talked about earlier when you first started, like, knowing people that you can trust to, get those evaluations and talk to people, because it is like we all know each other in this business. And I think the one thing, like, you lean on people. Like, I would be lying if I told you that, when Soups and Tish were at Columbia and there was a kid who was engineering and was short for them, that they would call and be like, hey,
Yeah. Oh God,
it's short for us, but like, you should definitely be in on him. Like, I'm calling that kid within the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I think, like,
of course.
that stuff happens in this business. And I think, like, people don't realize, like, how interconnected this is. Yeah. While also, like, you're going to get the truth out of people. And all it takes is just one time to get burned by someone where you're like, I ain't going back to that well. You know, but we have guys, like, you could call and be like, hey, what do you think? And be like, this guy, like, you should be on this kid. Like, okay, done. Like, say no more.
If you know me and I know you, like, what I like, you also know what plays well with the way that I coach or our program. Like, we don't have to spend much time on it. If you say to me, like, hey man, this guy would be perfect. If you're looking for a left-handed hitting first baseman who is an average defender, but makes up for it with the bat. If you're looking for that guy, this is your guy right here. Okay, beautiful. That's actually exactly what we're looking for. Because we've got a guy that plays good defense, but doesn't bring the juice at the plate that we need. So your guy sounds like that's what we need. Bang, that's the guy. So it's critical for us as coaches to have the relationships and like, school like Colby, like I got to have them up and down the East Coast, West Coast, and everywhere in between, because we can draw from all of them. It's critical for us to have those because it helps so much in recruiting. It allows us to get the right kids for our program.
Yeah. And I think the other part to the high academic world is that you are recruiting nationally, like it seems weird when you first start doing it, but like, because the vast majority of Division III schools are in New England, New York, Mid-Atlantic area, but like we'll call it New England and New York for argument's sake, like. But you're legitimately recruiting now. Like, go look at the rosters. Like, go look at your roster. Go look at, like, when I was at RPI, and you can go look at it now. Like, there's guys from California. There's guys from Washington. There's guys from Texas and Florida. Like, they're not, like, you're not just recruiting New York and New England and the minute, like, you're going everywhere. One, because the school can draw that far, but two, like, you have to from because we're all, the dirty secret, like, we're kind of all recruiting the same kids. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you because you're going nationally and seeing it all, like, you're going to draw kids from California and Washington and into Texas and Arizona. Like, there's a lot of really good baseball being played all over this country. And I think, when we were talking about earlier, like, yeah, like, you could be the dude where you're from and run a 6'6", and, the guy from the town over played Division I. Like, it's a big country, man. There's a lot of really good baseball being played everywhere. And it's a small percentage of people who are going to go play. Like, you should be proud if you go play college baseball. Like, it's a small percentage of people that get to do it. Like, but you have to be good. And it's like you're up against it nationally, especially in the high academic world. Like, you have to be able to do it academically, and you have to be able to do it athletically. And those are two things that are hard to find, but they're out there, and you can find them. Like, the internet is out there. You can see there. You can look up who's been good, and like, we talk about this all the time with people. Like, I'll bring up the D1 thing again, but like, you can go see what previous records were. You can see what the record is now. You can see what the stats are. You can see how many all league and all American, like all region guys, like, that's telling in your process of like, hey, they're bringing guys in, and like, I mean, he's had 5 all region guys and set, like, a couple all Americans, and they have 5 or 6 guys in the all league team every year. Like, they're developing guys there and they're creating a winning culture and winning games. Like that means you're going to walk into that program and likely have a really good chance of developing into the best version of yourself versus looking at it and being like, they don't win. There's nobody on the all league team. There's no all region or all Americans. Like, and those programs are out there, like, but it's easy to find on the internet.
And I think like that's important information for them to make decisions on. Like, okay, great. Like you want to go to a Division I school and maybe it's not a Power 5 school and, maybe it's all about conference play there. Like that's where the focus is, but you're still going to play out of conference games, and maybe, your record's going to suffer for that. Like, how's that going to affect you? Like if you're like crazy competitive and like, you want to have a winning experience out of conference and in conference, like, well then, maybe that's not the place for you, even though you still be able to tell everybody you played Division I baseball, maybe maybe that's super important to you. I don't know. But like, then the other part is like, you want to develop and you want to have the opportunity to be the best player you can be. Okay, well, this program has developed kids into all conference and all region types players. Like it's happening here. So the opportunity for that to happen to you is here as well. So, I think those are all things that, people gotta ask questions and do their research and make sure that they don't leave any stone unturned.
No, it's important because I think like that's where people end up jammed up in the, I made the wrong decision and that's where we end up in the portal. And I don't think the portal is the worst thing in the world, but
No.
I didn't necessarily have to deal with it a whole hell of a lot when I was at RPI, and it really wasn't as prevalent as it is now, obviously. And I don't necessarily know how many high-end academic schools are going to be doing a lot with it, but it's something that's there. It doesn't necessarily mean that, people won't be recruiting some people out of it, but I don't think it's something where it's going to take over the high end academic world.
I think that too often, I think that the portal is used like because of playing time, and I think that, it's for some guys like, that can, their reason of looking at it, like, I got 3 guys ahead of me. I don't think I can leapfrog them and I want to play. In my conversation with the coach has been like, hey, those guys are in front of you right now and you got to leapfrog them. And if internally you don't think you can, well then, yeah, the portal's probably a good place for you to land. But I think too often, kids hop in there just because they didn't play, and, hopefully, these people have done enough research about the decision that they made and they knew that it was going to be challenging, and they probably, the opportunity to play as a freshman is there, but it's a hard thing to crack the lineup. And hopefully, they knew that going in and because it didn't happen the first year, that they didn't start every game or play shortstop or whatever the case may be, that they chose the school for the right reasons and they see it all the way through and their time will come, but I think too often they jump in there too quick, and that's where we see problems happen, and it's all because probably they just a lot of times didn't ask the right questions or pay attention to the right things or have people helping them make the right decision in the first place.
I think that we'll touch on this and then we'll ask the last question. I'm grateful of your time. I've had a lot of fun. I didn't realize how long we've been on here. But I think, cracking the lineup as a freshman or being an arm, throwing leverage innings is tough, right? Like it's something that we both know is tough for guys to do. Doesn't mean that guys don't have opportunities and such. I think that one of the things that I found interesting when I was still coaching was like the amount of guys, especially younger guys, that would be like, well, I need a couple more opportunities in game to show you what I can do. And it's like, man, we have you have an opportunity every day Like
Yeah.
I watch you go through BP, I watch you go through drills, I watch you take fungos. Like I watch you take live ground balls during BP, and you go 6 of 10
Yep.
on those balls. Like while the guy in your position takes all of them seriously and goes 10 for 10.
Yep.
Like and makes the throws, and he's there's a big difference, and I think it takes guys, especially younger, like the freshmen, to make that jump from freshman to sophomore year of like, I have to take every day seriously at practice, in the weight room, whatever it is I'm doing, because because I feel like they don't necessarily realize how much we actually see as coaches. Like we see a lot more than you think that we see.
Right.
And I forget who we were talking about this with earlier, but like, you can tell within the first probably 15 to 20 minutes of practice number 1 in the season, of like who did what they were supposed to in the off season and who didn't.
Oh,
like
yeah.
you have a really good feel of like, he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
That guy did stuff, like, and and it's experience, but the other part is like, the more you coach, the more you see. And I always thought, like, that's what I would always tell my guys. Like, you guys think I don't see some of this stuff. Like, I'm constantly paying attention to all of this. Like, I'm constantly evaluating. So, like, like we had a guy one year, I'll never forget this. We talked about, he was a pitcher. He misfielded some bunts. And then after the game, we're talking, he's like, well, I feel like we don't go over fielding bunts enough. And I was like, okay. So what do we do? A couple days later, we're doing PFP stuff, and I look down, and he's doing nothing, standing off to the side. And I'm like, so you screwed up.
Yeah.
Kind of blamed it on me because I didn't give you enough time. And then we give you enough time, and you don't do it anyways.
Right.
And I but like, they don't think that you see it.
Right.
So then, then I have to make a scene about it so that everyone knows that I saw it. But it's like, I like, you have opportunities, especially, as you, like, when you play college baseball, like, it's every day, it's inter squads, it's, it's being able to run the bases. And I've said this before in here too, like, catchers struggle running the bases when they get to college, because it's like everyone runs for the runner in summer ball.
Yep.
And, you get them you get it, like, they don't know how to go first to third.
Yep.
They don't know how to run base. It's like those things are things that keep you out of the lineup.
Yep.
And I think that, like, it always goes to the in-game stuff, because I think that that's something that's ingrained to them forever, because that's, you don't practice nearly as much as you do in college at a younger age. Whether it could just be lessons, but like, you're not really practicing a whole hell of a lot. Like, when you get to college, like, there's a lot that goes on in practice.
Yeah.
And like, those are your opportunities to be able to kind of show up and show out of like, hey, what should, like, this is why I should be, I deserve an opportunity to be able to get in the game. And then the flip side to it is like, you might earn that opportunity, but you got to show up in game and do it.
Yeah.
Because we get paid to, well, not me anymore, but you get paid to win games. Like, I used to tell my guys all the time, like, I don't go into my exit meeting with my boss at the end of the year and they're like, okay, Tommy he's sad because he didn't play a lot. Like, that's not something that gets said to me. It's like, all right, you were 20-19. How are we going to win more games next year? Like, oh, here's our plan.
Yep.
And that gets lost, I think, sometimes, most of the time, on younger players.
Yeah, and I think also, like, at the beginning of the year, like, I asked the team, like, what do you guys want? What's our mission this year? You guys tell me. Like you guys, do we want everybody to play? We can go through the whole year and do that. Do we want, do we want all the juniors and seniors to play all the games, or the majority of the games, and the younger guys? Like, we could go through all that. If that's what the team wants to do, then that's what we want to do. No, our team wants to put the bet. We want to try to win every single game that we play. As soon as they turn the scoreboard on, that's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, our team this year, like, we committed to what our mission was, and so that's the way that we operate the lineup. That's the way that we, evaluate who's the best 9 for that day, because that's what the team chose to be, and so. Consequently, because that's what the team committed to, then my job is to make sure I don't miss who's making plays in practice and who's throwing strikes and who's getting outs and who's playing the best in center field and who's not, so like that, our job comes with that responsibility. And, if we're doing it right, then we are paying attention to all that stuff. So consequently, hopefully we're writing out the right lineup every day.
No, I think we are so far this year for the Mules. Last question. I don't want to take up too much time. I've already taken up too much already. What advice would you give to families on the recruiting process? I mean, I know we covered a lot tonight, but what would be some of your highlights that you would give to people who are going through the recruiting process right now or very soon?
Get advice from people who have experience in doing or have been through it or are advising those to get to where they want to get to. Because this is the most, as it's been said before by smarter people than me, like this is the most important decision that you're going to make for your child or the player is going to make that decision. It's the most important one they make. And I think that if you are advised correctly and you get more in, like everyone knows, like let's ask the questions, like simple baseball questions, but not the in-depth stuff that, like we just talked about. If they're able to get that education from experienced people, it's going to help lead them towards the right choice of where, they end up going and the right program at the right school. And then consequently, they're not going into the portal because they're at the place that they should be at. I think that's probably the best advice. I think, like from a player's perspective, the best advice I think I could give them is like, just go be yourself. Don't try to play to impress us. Impress us with what you possess. If you're a touch and feel lefty, be the best touch and feel lefty we've ever seen. If you don't have velocity, don't try to just wake up that day that the coach is watching you pitch and have velocity, because you're not going to be at your best. If you're a power guy, hit the ball over the fence. If you're a speed guy, steal second base. Like do all the things that make you a successful baseball player. And if that's what we're interested in, I promise you, we're going to recruit you. But I think as a whole, like, just being educated, having experienced people around you help shape the decision that you make. Know what you want, and just be yourself. And I think that you'll end up at the right place.
I think that's great advice. I think the people you can surround yourself in this process is huge for people. Like whether it's your high school coach or parents, whatever, someone who, people who can help you through this process is one of the biggest things. Obviously we do this, but it's something that, it doesn't necessarily have to be us, but surround yourself with people who can flat out help you. And you're going to make this process that is incredibly difficult a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed our talk tonight. Andy's going to be kicked off henceforth.
Yeah, you don't need him. You don't need Andy. Like,
and you're going to be a guest interviewer after this. It's going to be me, you, and whoever our other guest is. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for listening. Tune in next week, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks.
Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.